sharing your germs with Ian
I'm
instead
trying
of
to be
us.
as corner of the table here, so. Thanks.
That's an old meeting. Thank you. Nice.
Okay.
All right.
You want to take Chief till the end?
I gotta go. That's the old meeting. Laura, can you see it pop up live now or not? Sorry. It's
So it
easier
just
to
keeps
do
going
it
back to
before.
the first.
Because it should be streaming now. If you go through the YouTube now, go through that link. I think maybe that now I might have to replace that.
How do I do it? Can I literally go to YouTube?
It's live. We may be live right now, so we need to go back.
Looks like we are.
It says we are. It is live? Sorry. Okay, so
Thank
you're
you.
good.
Okay.
I'll go fix that link.
Okay, so if I can watch it on the
Yep.
All right, so for those who are watching at home, you probably had a blackout on that. Our IT person just came in and let us know that we lost our link, but we're back now. So we had, just to recap the last little bit, there was some conversations from Councillor Kinney and Councillor Wells, and I think, Joey, I think you were on the previous part, but what we've done to the original motion was we added the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Seaway initiatives as a friendly amendment to the motion as presented. So I will, we did do the vote, but for those watching at home, we're going to reenact the vote if we can. So that was moved by Councillor
By
Nina and Kim.
myself and Councillor.
by Nina and Councillor Kinney. The motion as read, as amended, and I will ask once again, all those in favor? And once again, it is passed unanimously. I will now pass the chair back to Her Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to new business, we have a motion moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Boulanger, that Committee of the Whole recommends to Council that it receive the December 3rd, 2019 Animal Control Service Delivery Report for information, and that Committee of the Whole recommends to Council that the Municipal Law Enforcement and Licensing Department issue the attached RFP for animal control services and report back to Committee on the results of the said RFP. We do have Jeff in the audience if we have any questions. Are there any questions? Councillor Wells.
Not so much a question, and I've already spoken to Jeff and to Dina with regards to the request for proposals, and it was only to ask them to consider in both all three parts some reference to acting with the phrase I used was with due respect for the safety, health, and welfare and wellness of the animal, and in accordance, another phrase, in accordance with the accepted professional standards of care and treatment of the animals. I did not find that to be a theme of the RFP, and I just believe that it should be in there that is a basic premise on which our operator would work. And there was another couple of places in part 3 where it referred to dead or traumatized animals, and I think there's a very large difference between dead and traumatized, and the treatment or the care follow through to each is totally different, and therefore my discussion with them was that I would like to have seen that separated out into 2 sections, so that one dealing with dead animals, whether they be domestic or wild, and secondly to traumatized, because I believe that they should be and treated totally in a different circumstance. So those were my comments to Dina and Jeff, and I've left it with them.
Did you have anything to add at this point? All right, any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Jeff. Next is a motion moved by Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor Foster, that Committee of the Whole direct staff to submit an expression of interest, EOI, in response to the Provincial Municipal Modernization Program. Is there any discussion on this item? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And next we are dealing with the budget, so I won't read that yet. I will pass it over to Jocelyn if you had something.
Thank you, Mayor Bepolchi, and good afternoon, members of council. I'm not sure if you would like me to walk you through the staff report, just for an overview, and whether or not there's questions or discussion to follow. Would you like
I'm
me-
assuming everyone has read it, but if you want to hit the highlights of
Okay.
changes.
So, just basically to give a general overview, this is our fourth budget meeting in the process of the 2020 budget. We presented draft 1 on October the 1st. We continued some of the discussions on October 24th, and then moved into draft 2 on the 19th of November, at which time we presented the option to consider phasing in some of the additional operating costs for the new library and arena. And then we moved to where we are today on draft 3. And some of the changes between draft 2 and draft 3, I would mainly highlight just a few of the more significant ones. We are repurposing the funding, requesting repurposing the funding for the West End Secondary Plan study and putting that in 2020 budget and moving the growth node study to 2021. There's no dollar change here, but it is a repurposing of the funding that was in the budget in draft 2. We also added some costs for the event sponsorship expenses so that we would be able to use $35,000 targeted towards fund of development of 3 major town-run events. So trying to reach the total 10 events for the year that the event department was aiming for. We also added $25,000 for some of the visitor enhancements at the beachfront, for a fire pit and a public art installation, some other works that need to be done to enhance that experience. And we reduced the capital asset replacement reserve contribution down to $71,000. This is our contribution to help replace the INF grant that is declining by 15% each year. So some of the increases that we put into the draft 3 budget, we offset by reducing this contribution as well. And then I'd just like to highlight that we did finish draft 3 with the original phasing in approach for the new library and the arena, which was evenly distributing the funds that were needed over the 3 years. Once the full draft and the forecasts were all completed, that gives us an opportunity now to look back and see what's changing from year to year, because there are variances from one year to the next of what our needs are. And that presented the opportunity for us to phase this cost in a variable way rather than evenly. And that reduces the tax rate increase from 4.96% where we were at draft 3. If we phase this in through a varied approach, we'd be at 3.79%. And some of the offsets of the funding that's going to be needed for these additional costs is going to come from one-time projects in the next 3 years that hit 1 year and aren't required in the following year. We also may have some reduction in our debenture costs pending the outcome of the beachfront development. That would also provide some opportunity. So these are ways that we'll be able to accommodate what's going to be required in the next 3 years to reach where we need to be for 2023. So I think that gives you a general overview of the staff report.
Okay. Councillor Boulanger?
Thank you, Chair. Would you know the amount of the first year phase-in for 2020?
Yes, so the amount that's included if we make this change, so the budget documents don't have this change in it yet, but what we're proposing is before we go to the public meeting, we'll change the phase-in amount to 2020 to be $300,000. That $300,000 will stay in the base in 2021, and then for 2022 we'd add another $400,000. So we would be putting in over those 3 years a total of $700,000 to the base.
Thank you. The reason I asked the question is you had, at the last meeting, I had still discussed that I wasn't comfortable that we had not made any allocation for the extension of the walk-in clinic for a full year. And you had suggested that for 2020, we may consider this, and certainly the phase-in amount for 2020 would allow us to do that. I still believe for the public meeting, which is coming up on, I believe, the 10th, is that there needs to be some allocation or mention of that. I'm hearing from a huge number of residents of how important they believe the walk-in clinic is, and with the recent situation with the services of one doctor being suspended, it's even more critical for our community.
Okay, and just on that, if I recall from our last meeting, we did have the discussion that if council chose to move forward in 2020, after we've received all the information that staff are working on with the doctors, there would be money in reserves that we could utilize for that. Is that correct?
So, if I'm understanding correctly, this is for the doctor recruitment? 'Cause we
Walk-in
No,
clinic.
For the walk-in clinic, okay, so for the walk-in clinic, we would be able to use this phase-in amount of 300,000 for 2020. That would be available, that's what we had discussed in our previous meeting. Am I answering your question? Could you?
Not quite. I thought the discussion that we had at the last meeting was that if we chose to wait for the information that the CAO was working on with the doctors to determine how we're moving forward, that if we chose to move forward, I believe you said that we had a reserve account that we could take that money from.
This would be the reserve funding, because this 300,000 is going to be contributed to the reserve.
Okay.
So this was the monies that we were referring to. We had that built in, and we knew that it was just going to be a contribution to the reserve. Therefore, we'd be able to pull it from the reserve and cover the after-hours clinic with those funds.
Okay, but I think we need to be very clear that even if it's in here, council still has to have the discussion. I don't want people to think that, you know, this money is in here and it's a go. We are waiting on that other information.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You were next.
Two things, Your Worship. Again, on this, we're not having a discussion about the after-hours clinic, so that's why I have not declared a conflict related to that. This is just a general budget discussion. So I want it clear as to why. Then my other question had to do with this report. If you go up one page from where you are, I believe, you're talking about the potential sale of the beachfront properties. And where's my, when the properties are sold, it's anticipated 13.6 million loan plus accumulated debt will be paid off in that last paragraph. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my recollection is only half of that has the ability to be paid off at any time.
Through your worship, yes, the TD bank portion,
Yes.
that loan will come mature in, I believe it's 2022 or 2023, so that portion could be paid. I did inquire with Ontario Infrastructure. I did receive back some information about if we were to pay that one out. I haven't had the opportunity to review the penalties and interest
Okay.
to assess whether or not that would really be viable. However, the information is there if we wanted to pursue it, but it would be very specific to the time period when you're doing it. So, you know, if we were doing that 2 years from now or a year and a half from now, that'll be a very different number. So the number isn't that.
I think that's my point, is that if prepaying a loan that is open or has a short maturity date is one thing. Paying one off that still has 18, 19 years, whatever or 21 years left on it can be a significant thing. So, but we'll cross that bridge.
Yes.
Okay, it kind of looked like the assumption is, well, we can just give them 13.6 and a little interest. It's not quite that easy. So thank you for that.
Councillor Wells?
Yeah, it may have already been covered. I guess, as everyone's aware, I've spoken a couple of times about the possibility of needing to continue back to the walk-in clinic for a little while, if necessary, and if there's no other alternative. Absolutely no further than 1 year, but absolutely. And at the time, the CAO gave me assurances that should we need it, the funding, as you said, Mayor Bafolci, the funding can be found within the existing budget, and I was comfortable with that. And I take the CAO at his word, and So I have no further concern that it's not shown as a line item.
Thank you. Councillor Kinney?
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to bring it back to the budget, and I want to thank our staff for doing a fantastic job bringing to the council your expertise and being able to look at the needs and the wants of our community.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Councillor Wells?
And one last comment on a different topic, and it's not, need to preface my remarks with saying I am not against beachfront events. I am not speaking in opposition to that. I am not speaking against any of that concept that as part of our, tourism, whatever we need to be providing an incentive for tourism. So let's get that clear that that's where I am. But at the same time, I also look at the beachfront events budget line, and it's something in the neighborhood of $400,000. Actually, it's beachfront events. It's actually $410,800 with a net of $368,000 within the budget. I think that's something going forward. I'm not arguing against it here at all in this budget, but I think going forward we have to start to look at economic benefit versus expenditure, and look at who we are serving with that $368,000. Who are we serving at the expense of the local taxpayer, both residential and business taxpayer? And so I would hope that over the coming year, as we move forward to another budget year, that our economic development officer could start to, as part of his portfolio, look at where that balance is and what is appropriate in that long-term expenditure, because it certainly is significant if you translate it down to a budget item and a tax, and it's all taxpayer money. You're looking at 1%, 1.5, approaching 2% of the on the budget. Again, not arguing against, just looking at trying to rationalize that expenditure versus benefit.
Okay, and I do know that Tyler has been out and starting to meet with the business community and is getting some feedback that will be helpful to us in this type of situation, in this topic moving forward. So, Councillor Boulanger?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a point of clarification, because when we talk about an expense, when in fact it's an investment, I think it's important that we probably as a municipality don't have a great measure on the economic impact of that investment, and that's something we have to get better at. Is there is an offsetting tax generation related to tourist visitation, and I don't want anyone that's listening to believe that this is just an expense without offsetting revenue. We know there's offsetting revenue through accommodators, through restaurants, through all of these other things. We just don't effectively measure it very well today, and that's something that hopefully our economic development department can work on going forward.
Yeah, and I don't think Councillor Wells was saying it.
I think that's what I said I believe that's exactly what I said when I said we need to look at the economic benefit as versus the expenditure. I think that's what I said.
Right, and Tyler is meeting with all the businesses out there to get this feedback. He's already got some that's quite interesting, so I think we'll have a good handle on how our events are affecting local businesses and what those local businesses see as important events in our community moving forward. But that's not for today's discussion. So is there anything else on the budget or discussion with Jocelyn? Okay. Do you have anything to add before I read this? She's like, it's moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Kinney, that Committee of the Whole as Budget Committee received the 2020 Operational and Capital Budget Draft 3, the 4-year operational and 10-year capital forecast for information, and that Committee of the Whole as Budget Committee take varied phase-in approach to implementing the town's financial plan to pay for the new library and arena, resulting in a proposed tax rate increase of 3.79% for 2020 and that Committee of the Whole and Budget Committee forward the proposed 2020 operational capital budget, the 4-year operational and 10-year capital forecast to the budget public meeting for input from the public. Lots of publics and budgets in there. Any final comments? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And we will adjourn this meeting